David Lynch, rest in peace. One of these artists who's like a father figure to me, on the level of John Coltrane, John Zorn, Morton Feldman, these people who I talk about constantly on this channel. I got into David Lynch when I was 10. Twin Peaks was on the air, and I started watching it with my dad, and it immediately changed my life. I learned about mystery. Not mystery like solving the mystery of Laura Palmer's killer. I'm talking about the world of the mysterious, the world of the unseen, a world of infinite possibilities. At that age, I actually wanted to be a filmmaker. I was really into horror movies in particular. And Lynch showed me what world building is. Total world building. A realm that you enter into, and then within that realm, there are other possible realms. You're entering into a realm of all realms. The mystery of it and the beautiful romance of it, and then there's horror to that. That infinite possibility of worlds there's a vertigo to it, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Of course, Angelo Badalamenti's music affected my aesthetics quite a bit. I talk about him in a little video when he died, but this is not going to be about him. This is going to be about Lynch, and Lynch affected me actually as a composer. His film making, I guess you could say the symbolism or use of symbols, affected my music on a purely harmonic, melodic level, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So yeah, I'm 10 years old. It's 1990, right? And there's this sense of like the early 90s. I think more than other decades, it wasn't just because I was a child. I think more so than the aughts or the 10s or the 20s, there was this self-consciously like modern thing of just like, it's the 90s, man. I mean, people would say that like, hey, it's the 90s, man. You know, like you can be gay in the 90s. Hey, man, you know, Twin Peaks could be on TV, you know, like a chick could play bass in a band. Like it's the 90s. Lynch taught me about magic. He believes in magic. I'm going to focus on Twin Peaks a lot when I talk about this. Twin Peaks will be like the main node for Lynch's work, for the way I talk about it. Although, I've seen all of his films like 10 trillion times. But Peaks, Lynch believes in magic. Cooper believes in magic. His method as a detective is based in interpreting signs in a sort of auguristic, sort of seer-like way. There's a way where you're dealing with the non-rational, the sub-rational, the supra-rational. This trusting of intuition. Lynch, he's explicit about it with Cooper, who in Twin Peaks is kind of Lynch. I feel like it's almost like Cooper's solving the murder of Laura Palmer. By the way, spoiler alerts. There's going to be, if you haven't seen Peaks, like watch that and come back. But it's almost like Cooper, his detection on the show, detective work on the show is like Lynch's work as a creator of the show, because Lynch, in a lot of ways, felt like he was not in control. He was exploring what's possible and dealing with intuition in this way, intuition and magic. In Twin Peaks, when they walk into the room and it's like there's just this huge deer head on the table, just huge, taking up the whole shot, completely in everyone's way. And then they're about to talk about something, and one of the ladies is just like, "Oh yeah, it fell." And then they just keep going. It's like, he just wanted to have a big deer's head there. He just wanted to have that. And then he's like, let's come up with an explanation after. Oh, it fell. Like, just, you have an idea, ask questions later, explain it later. People call Lynch a great surrealist. I don't want to use that label, even though probably it's apt, But, I learned from Lynch to trust dreams to take dreams very seriously. And it's a different kind of relationship to dreams than the psychoanalytic one. I was raised by two shrinks, and so of course I was taught that dreams contain all these messages and value. Thing is, when it's the Freudian thing with dreams, it's deep and it's true, it's real. But when you're looking at them as like parts of your psyche, parts of your inner life to be interpreted and brought to the surface, this sort of psychologized thing, that's not what this is. With Lynch, dreams come from the outside. And the answers to Laura Palmer's Killer, or the answers to what to do creatively, your next move creatively as an artist, those answers are they're inside insofar as you have the capability to interpret the dreams and glean the insights from them, but it's not coming from this personalized, psychologized thing of like, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what happened to me as a kid. This is from my past. These are my feelings, my buried feelings. We're going to bring them to the surface. There's an impersonal quality to it. So to say that the answers are in you it's not the same kind of thing as the Freudian thing. This is messages that come from outside. They come from beyond. They come from beyond the veil. It's a way more like ancient view of what dreams are. But still, even though the dreams are not about you, they're coming from the outside, there's just this sense of total confidence as an artist to just be like, I can trust my intuition, this belief that if you have a dream about something, you're going to take it seriously. And it influenced how when I have a dream, I take it, I think, all right, someone might die, something might happen to me. I'm going to be cautious on this day. I've predicted things in dreams that were very major, and it only further validates this Lynchian, belief in dreams. Before I get deeper into his work, it's like, I'll say from the past couple years or so, I've been taking inspiration from Lynch just as a guy. Just how well-adjusted he is as a person. I mean, he's obviously totally quirked up, but as far as he's just so wholesome as a guy, and he makes music. He makes work that is about so much horrible stuff, violence. But his sort of like howdy-doody kind of naive, big smile, and this sort of like all-American guy. It's really a beautiful antidote and example of me how about not being like a tragic figure. I think that is a difference between film and music. When you play, as a musician, people expect everything to be coming right from like, who your life, your autobiography. If it's dark, it must mean that you're dark. It must mean that your past is dark. Whereas like Lynch, filmmaker, it is expected that it's a little bit more like you're dealing with the world, and especially you're dealing with dreams. Again, it's not the buried, psychologized stuff. It's more like interpreting the outside and imagination, reaching outward. Lynch says that his childhood was just perfect. He says it was perfect. And he's known for being the guy that shows like the underbelly of like, Norman Rockwell 1950s, white picket fence, that underneath that there's these horrors, right? And so he is about that, but it's not about his horrors. It's about the horrors, But yes, something I've been reflecting on with Lynch that I find so deep is actually how simple his stuff is thematically. There might be this feeling of complexity because it's so, weird or whatever, and there's so much stuff that's confusing on a narrative level, maybe in, surrealistic, it's not clear cut. But as far as like the themes, he's dealing with like good and evil. His vision of good and evil, as you see in Twin Peaks or in Blue Velvet, it's quite simple. He's not getting into like, well, what is, who really is evil? Is there such a thing as evil? What if I'm evil? What if, it's kind of binary, man. The FBI is good in that story, except the ones that are corrupt and they're bad. Bob, the evil spirits, are evil. It's good versus evil, man. It's quite clear. It's funny because my work is not like that. My lyrical concerns and my musings and what I put out there actually is a lot more on the like, well, what is this? Where's the line? I do get a lot more questioning. So I don't know if I've absorbed that simplicity, but I appreciate it. And it's inspiring me as far as moving forward. I mean, fire. It's like just the most classic primal theme to be dealing with in art. Fire, electricity. I mean, it's more modern, but he's fascinated at just the substance of electricity, just as an aesthetic, transmission, crackling, fire, messages, radio signals. These are things that are just captivating without, like you can just be captivated by them without it being this complex, this is a symbol for this, and it's, really like it makes you question, fire, doubles, doppelgangers, the self and the shadow self, not very complicated or weird. There's this way that you can understand his work without a whole lot of like media literacy or whatever. In Peaks, like they really show you the value of a life. Cooper has this thing where he's saying to Albert, Albert comes, he's all cynical and from the city and he's unfazed by this death. He's just looking at a corpse as just a body. Cooper says, Albert, in Twin Peaks, life has meaning. Every life. It's a way of life I thought was gone from the earth. And there's something beautiful about how, people laugh about Twin Peaks. There's this sort of campy soap opera, melodrama thing to it. But I don't know if I don't think Lynch means most of that. I don't think he means to be camp or kitsch. I think that he's not overstating how much one death means. In a small town, of course, it means a lot. But, this thing about one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic, the Stalin quote, I think it's him. We like the Lynch thing of how he depicts death in Twin Peaks is like, it's funny. We're talking about the 90s. It's really like the opposite of the Tarantino 90s or even the Oliver Stone kind of 90s where you're like, it's all desensitized, like, like, oh, like violence, death, like, this ironic detachment. It's like Lynch, he wants to like resensitize you. One of the really primal things that he deals with that is really deep to me is presence and absence, just characters disappearing. Dennis Hopper like laughs in the scene, let's fuck, ha ha ha, and just boom, he's just gone. The next he disappears. In Lost Highway, the main character is just replaced by another guy. And there's just so much stuff in Peaks where it's just like, it's like, I wasn't there, you thought I was there, just like that, people disappear. The little boy that does the creamed corn makes the creamed corn disappear. It's like sometimes things happen just like that. The corn is there and then it's not there anymore. It's fucking terrifying, man. And it's just the horror of presence and absence. And that's like, I talk about that a little bit in my song, See You at the Show. I mean, I take it in a very different direction, but haunt you with absence, haunt you with presence, The primal thing with presence and absence, you look at like with a little baby, peekaboo. What is peekaboo? It's the play of presence and absence. I'm here, I'm not here. I'm here, I'm not here. With a little baby, you do it in this playful way so you can kind of ease them into the horror of presence and absence. You're able to do it in a way where you can test that. I think they call that object permanence in psychology. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Lynch loves strobe lights. It's so powerful. In really powerful scenes, he's always using the strobe, and in the scene where they're, this is presence and absence in its very pure form, like really rapid presence and absence, the strobe effect, I talk about that in See You at the Show, the strobe effect, my strobe effect of my new vibe. Like in the scene where they're doing the autopsy on Laura Palmer, that's where you get this light. It's not a dream sequence, so you can't have completely surreal strobe light, but he has the overhead light in the autopsy place is flickering on and off. The very beginning of the scene, the person working at the morgue is like, yeah, the light's broken, sorry. Okay, the explanation's out of the way. Now we can have the excuse to have the aesthetic thing, which we have to have, that makes the scene so absolutely bone-chilling. Now, this thing with presence and absence, for me, what I'm getting is that that's a big thing with how he deals with death. When they find Laura Palmer's body, right? When they find her corpse, it's deeply sad. The music is swelling. Laura's theme, oh God, Laura Palmer, the tears, it's grief and sadness and loss, the corpse. But when you get to the scene in the classroom where Donna and James are in the classroom and they look over and they see Laura's the seat, her seat in class where she usually is, they see the empty seat. And then you see, and at that moment, you hear some girl screaming outside and running. That is way more horrifying than finding the corpse. You understand? It's like the absence is what's horrifying. Here one day, gone the next. And I mean, like my experiences of death in my life, people that I've lost, and I've lost some people, man, recently and when I was young. And the way Lynch deals with death as this just sudden absence is affects how I experience and like look at these how deaths, how I mythologize them, I guess, in my own life. Beyond the horror of the violence, I think it's deeper than the horror of the violence. I think that the horror with this absence and the horror of death, it's how he gets into how death and loss fucks up your experience of time. And that's something that I have experienced with these losses in my life. There's a horrifying sense of what it does to your perception of time. And it's like, all right, I'm going to try to think of how to really say this, is that like a death, when you suffer like a serious loss, someone dies, it's like this break where you forked into a new timeline. You're in a new reality. And it's like I have to believe in parallel timelines and alternate timelines. And I don't really get into the new age, I don't read about that, multi-dimensions and stuff. I don't go deep with reading about what other people have to say about that. But people that I've lost, it's like suddenly there's this rupture where you forked. And there just has to be another timeline where that person lived. It's such a break, there has to be another one where they're living. And then, that points to this thing of like, well, there must be infinite alternate timelines. Therefore, everything is real. Every possible, everything that could happen has happened. Everything has happened. And then you're in that zone. To me, that's horrifying. That's not beautiful. I say anything is possible is beautiful. Anything is possible, artistically or something. The mystery of life, like that is beautiful. But there's something really horrifying about it, where it's like, it's not just like you're lost in a dream. Life is a dream. You're in a nightmare. Your loved one dies. Now you're in a nightmare. It's like, no, this is real. The timeline where they lived is real. All these timelines, it's all real. There's a vertigo to that, man, that I find absolutely terrifying. And Lynch really plays with that in these alternate timelines and this time travel stuff and the going back and forth. As far as this horrifying sense of time, another guy whose work really gets into that is Nick Land. I'm not really prepared to philosophize on that, but Nick Land. Also, Thomas Ligotti gets into that quite a bit. Even in a more pop culture thing, the True Detective, the time is a flat circle thing, it's a little bit less bone-chilling in that, but there's similar sense of like the horror of nonlinear time or multilinear, infinitely linear forking time, this disintegration of like all infinite possibility as infinite like disintegration maybe. So I've been going off on what I find so deep about him, but I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not a writer, sort of, lyrics. Yes, I'm a writer. But, I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a musician. I'm a composer. How has his work, influenced me as a composer, specifically musically? That's a good question. I don't have a ton of concrete examples from my main current body of work, okay? And by the way, we're not talking about the influence of Angelo Badalamenti. You can hear the influence of Badalamenti over a lot of my stuff. But I'm talking about Lynch as a filmmaker. How has his work influenced me as a composer? If you go back to my stuff in my early 20s, where I was writing for Z's, I was writing the piece B is for Burning, and then a little later I was writing, when I wrote the piece Poison Darts for Two Percussionists, and also the piece I wrote for Z's called Glyphs. That stuff, the Lynchian, his use of symbols and symbolism and signs. And I want to get out of my depth to acting like I'm talking about semiotics, but let's say signs. I took some direct technical structural influence from him in my early days, which is that Lynch's use of repetition, and I don't mean repeating something a bunch of times in a row. I shouldn't even say repetition. I should say like recurrence, like intermittent repetition of elements. At that time was really influential to me as a composer. And this was before I was writing stuff with a sort of song form structure of like verses and choruses. This was at a time where I was writing purely instrumental music, and we're dealing with long, ever-changing, ever-flowing melodic and rhythmic variation over long stretches of time. B is for burning, poison darts, these are the compositions we're talking about. This use of repetition intermittently, to me, there's something really profound about the way Lynch does that, where you get this feeling that it makes sense, quote unquote. You get the feeling that you're being given a message, or that there's a coherence, or that the symbols mean something. This means this. Because it recurred, it means this. And then you want to do the detective work. It happened here, and then it happened here. What do those two instances have in common, and how are they different? And the thing that I really loved about that is that without interpreting repetition, without interpreting symbols and coming up with a logical explanation, a narrative, without narrativizing it, or at least before analyzing or narrativizing it, that feeling that you get when something recurs, where it's powerful and evocative without any explanation, literally just a thing coming back, makes it just bristles with meaning, even without you knowing the meaning. There doesn't need to be a meaning. It just is the vibe of meaning when things recur. It just ties things together on like the most simple level. And like Lynch is always doing that. Just, Judy, the word Judy gets said in the series, and then just like 25 years later in the Return of Twin Peaks, Judy becomes a thing. I say Judy again. Sometimes there's just the arm, Bob's arm comes out of the ominously out of the trees. And then later, the dwarf is like, I am the arm. People are writing a million essays about what that means and this and that. But it's like, man, it's not that you're a sucker to try to interpret it. It's not that. It's that it has power without interpretation. It's just recurrence. When you have things recurring like that, without explaining it and without needing to explain the connection, but just experiencing the power of the recurrence itself, it's a way that the recurring things create a surface rather than a depth. It's like the power is in the surface that it creates. And this is the thing with 2D, two-dimensionality. Superficiality is usually considered a negative, but I mean this that's where the power is, that these symbols recurring create a surface. It's not a depth that you interpret. And this surface creates infinite possibilities, this sense of infinite possibilities, this sense of the power of things being held together without logic, held together with intuition, And so then also with the composition, with the melodic things recurring way later, exactly. I mean, Feldman does that. Feldman has some of that. Another thing that's Feldmanish, and also something that I was sort of dealing with in the early days compositionally, is, alongside the thing of like recurring, like sporadically recurring things that bristle with the meaning, the feeling of meaning, there's also a similitude, resemblance, similarity. It's a similar thing in Lynch, where it's like, the woman's name is Beaumont, and then they revisit the house and she's a different woman, and she's like, no, my name's Chalfont. It's creepy. It's similarity. It's got the presence absence thing as well. People's names being similar. It's like people resembling other people. It's like that's another thing that glues things together in a way that has power without logic. It's almost like this primitive, pre-modern thing of like, the brain looks like the walnut. Therefore, brains and walnuts go together. it's like pre-modern science, like medieval science, or like augury, or like interpreting omens or something. It's like, this looks like that, therefore the world is glued together without logic. I'm not going to logically explain what Chalfont and Beaumont have in common, these two people, these names. I'm not going to logically really explain what the walnut and the brain have in common, because we're not in the world of logic. We're in the world of dreams, interpretations, similitudes, surfaces, recurrence, dreams, I mean, that happens in dreams a lot. Something will look like something else and it'll be there. You can get all Freuded out about it and psychologize it and be like, well, this is similar to that because your dad beat you, etc. That may all well be true and powerful and necessary to look at. But with Lynch, it's just gluing this world together as a surface of similitudes and similarities, And my music now has some of that. It's just not as expansive. If you listen to Poison Darts, I think that's just a continuum of similitudes. That word, that term, I think I got that from Foucault, who talks about how before the age of reason, the world was less of a grid of logic and more of a continuum of similitudes. Okay, so I just went off. I could have organized this more, but there's who has the time? I've got to actually make the work and actually do what Lynch did, which is world build, rest in peace to just a master among masters. I honestly have often marveled at the fact that we even live in the same time period as Lynch. I'm grateful that I even got to see this stuff as it came out, But, the boomers are dying off. And, it's been fashionable to trash boomers. It has, okay? Fair enough. I mean, they ruined a lot. But that generation, the great masters of that generation, whether we're talking about Lynch or Kubrick or, Bowie, who died, Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen's actually a little pre-boomer. But who actually is going to replace these people? I mean, who are the Gen X masters on that level? Film? What, Tarantino, really? I mean, maybe Lars von Trier, I guess. But, I don't know, man. I don't know. And, I mean, musically, that could be a whole other video. But we're going to miss not just Lynch, but we're going to miss the great masters of the boomer generation. We are. We're going to regret all the shit talking we did during the past couple, past decade or whatever. And then we'll move on to trashing Gen X. But, yeah, one of the greatest masters of all time. We will be living with his brilliance forever. And, we were lucky to coexist with this man. All right.